My Vampire Shorts, the summer of killer clowns. It was the summer after their sophomore year at university, and Trev, Marcus, and Jake, three fraternity brothers, had decided to spend their break hiking through the wilderness of Yosemite. They were typical college guys, brash, carefree, and always looking for an adrenaline rush. Little did they know, the hike would change their lives forever. The trio had ventured deep into the park, trekking through towering pines and vast meadows, the serene beauty of nature providing an unexpected respite from their usual wild parties and late-night escapades. They camped on the edge of a quiet creek, roasting marshmallows, telling ghost stories, and joking about the dangers of the wilderness. But none of them expected that the true horror would come to them. Not from the wild animals they joked about, but from something darker, something unnatural. The attack came late that night. As they huddled around the fire, a strange rustling from the trees caught their attention. A shadow shifted in the darkness, too large, too fluid. Before they could react, the creature struck, a blur of clawed hands and snarling fangs. It was grotesque, skin that seemed to melt from its bones, eyes that glowed like molten gold. Its voice was a guttural hiss, a language no man should have understood. Jake was the first to scream as the creature tore into his arm, its fangs sinking deep into his flesh. The brothers fought back, but the creature was too fast, too strong. They barely escaped with their lives, managing to stumble back to their campsite and into the safety of the firelight. The creature left them for dead, retreating into the darkness, but not before marking them. Its bite had branded them, filling them with a hunger they had never known before. Over the next few days, the hunger began. Their bodies ached, their vision blurred, and a thirst gnawed at their insides. They realized too late that they had become something else, something not human anymore. Their senses were heightened, their strength was unmatched. They had become vampires. They returned to the city, but the normal life they had known felt empty. The hunger clawed at them. They tried to ignore it, to maintain their college facade, but it was impossible. The need for blood was insatiable. And as the days wore on, it became clear they had to feed. But just feeding wasn't enough. They craved chaos, excitement. They wanted to feel something, to experience something beyond just quenching their thirst. And so they came up with an idea that would take their hunting to a whole new level. The summer of killer clowns was born. The three brothers, Trev, Marcus, and Jake, decided to dress as clowns, their brightly colored costumes hiding the monstrous creatures they had become. They thought it would be perfect, a mask of laughter, a guise of joy, while beneath it all, they were predators, bloodthirsty and savage. They chose their colors carefully. Trev went with red, Marcus with blue, and Jake with yellow, each a representation of their former personalities. The clowns were a grotesque mockery of the laughter they once shared as frat brothers. They'd blend into the crowds, unnoticed. No one would expect a clown to be a killer. Their plan was to hunt in groups. They knew that, in groups, the fear would multiply. It would be a challenge, a game, and more importantly, it would be fun. They picked their targets carefully, groups of friends or families, people who were enjoying their day, thinking that everything was safe. At night, they would stalk their victims, waiting until the time was right. They would move quickly, disappearing into alleyways or dark corners of the city. The sound of distant laughter or the sight of a balloon twisting through the air would be the last thing their victims would hear or see. The clowns would leap from the shadows, their painted faces twisted in maniacal grins, their sharp fangs gleaming in the dim light. They would feed on their victims slowly, savoring the terror, dragging the process out. Trev, Marcus, and Jake were no longer the men they once were. They were creatures of the night, no longer bound by morality. They would often choose the weakest member of the group to start with, feeding on their fear, slowly draining them while the others screamed in horror. Marcus loved the chase. He would sneak up behind victims, whispering through the darkness, telling them there was nothing to fear, only to reveal his fanged grin at the last second. He would grab them from behind, holding them in place while Trev dug his teeth into their necks. Jake, always the most sadistic, would often make the victims watch as their friends were torn apart, giving them no hope, just the agony of knowing their fate was inevitable. Together, they killed over 100 people in a span of weeks. The news began to report strange disappearances. People found drained of blood, their bodies untouched, with only the eerie scent of decay lingering. The media dubbed it the Summer of Killer Clowns, and the city descended into chaos. No one was safe, but the clowns' bloodlust was too much to keep hidden for long. Word spread fast in the vampire community. There were other vampires in the area, older, more powerful. They didn't take kindly to these three brash, young upstarts who were drawing attention to their existence, breaking the unspoken rules of the night. The vampires had always operated in secrecy, blending in with the shadows, feeding quietly without drawing attention to themselves. These three reckless young killers, with their clown costumes and public rampage, were a threat to their way of life. A group of older, more experienced vampires tracked down the three frat brothers, determined to stop them before their chaos drew hunters to the area. They moved quickly, silently, slipping through the night like shadows. They knew they had to be careful. These were no ordinary men they were hunting. Trev, Marcus, and Jake had become powerful vampires, and their instincts were sharp. The showdown happened one foggy night in the same alleyways where they had claimed their last victims. The three clowns were in the middle of their rampage, their painted faces dripping with blood. They hadn't even heard the older vampires approaching. The battle was brutal. The older vampires were faster, more refined in their movements, and they attacked with the precision of seasoned hunters. They didn't give the clowns a chance to react. Trev was the first to fall, his body ripped apart in seconds by a vampire with claws like blades. Jake fought back viciously, but he was overpowered. The older vampires knew exactly where to strike, and with a single swipe, he was torn apart, his blood splattering against the walls in a final, gory display. Marcus tried to flee, but the vampires were too swift. They pinned him to the ground, and with one final crushing blow, his skull was shattered, the life drained from his body in an instant. The three clowns, once feared and unstoppable, were no more. In the end, the summer of killer clowns became nothing more than a nightmare. The vampires who had killed them made sure the bodies were disposed of in a way that no one would ever find them, erasing all traces of their existence. The city, still reeling from the terror of the rampage, would never know the true story behind the clowns. The only thing left were the whispers of blood-soaked laughter in the darkness, of clowns that came from the shadows to feed. And so, the city moved on, but those who knew the truth, the vampires who lived in the hidden corners of the world, understood one thing. The clowns had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Their rampage had come to an end, but the consequences of their actions would ripple through the vampire world forever. If you liked the story, please like, share, and leave a comment.